we'll get started. Just a second here. Okay, hopefully you guys can all see that screen. If you have an issue with seeing something or hearing something, just type that in the chat box and I should be able to see it. Oh, I'm going to turn my camera off actually as I do this part. Okay, so welcome to the webinar about women's health with dōTERRA. Women's health can be somewhat of a complicated issue. So my goal in this is to help you understand just sort of the basics. So you can understand how certain hormones work in your body, what are they doing, what are some negative effects that can happen, and what can you do about that. So we're not really encompassing all that involves in women's health, but a lot of times when people think of women's health, they think this is really an age-specific issue. So sometimes people think, okay, well, I'm good in this department until I hit menopause, or things like that. But the reality is, women's health, hormone balance or imbalance actually affects every woman from puberty on through the rest of her life. So wherever you are in that stage, I encourage you to really listen. These are really lifetime health issues we're talking about. Hormonal imbalance, osteoporosis, symptoms that are associated with PMS and menopause, and breast cancer, for example, are all women's health issues that can be related to hormonal function and hormonal imbalance. So let me just sort of give you a basic understanding. We're going to focus primarily on estrogen and progesterone. There are many, 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 many hormones in your body, but for the purpose of this webinar this evening, we're going to just focus on estrogen and progesterone. Now, it's also important to acknowledge that there are many kinds of estrogen in your body, and we're sort of lumping them all together just as estrogen. So if you are talking about a normal female monthly cycle, you see that estrogen and progesterone sort of have an inverse relationship with one another. When one is high, the other is low. For example, during your time of ovulation in your monthly cycle, your estrogen usually increases and your progesterone decreases. That is because the estrogen, it has many functions, but one of its functions is to prepare the body for pregnancy. So that estrogen increases, it prepares the body for pregnancy. Then, after the time of ovulation, that estrogen decreases and the progesterone increases. That is because that increase of progesterone is necessary to sustain the life of the ovum at that point. So the progesterone must increase to do that, and then you can see that it goes down again, and then we begin the whole cycle all over. Now, this is different from menopause. In menopause, your progesterone really drops off and kind of remains dropped off, and this is because it is assumed by your body at this point that you do not need to sustain a pregnancy. It's assuming you are not getting pregnant and you don't need to keep all of that going. So you see as that progesterone drops, your estrogen is heightened. Now that's not because necessarily you have more estrogen, but in the relationship between the progesterone and the estrogen becomes more dominant. And you can see at this point, you kind of begin to get in an imbalance. I am going to, whoops, wrong button. Hold on. I was just going to go ahead and mute everybody here as we go along. Again, if you have a question or anything like that, feel free to type it in the chat box. Okay, you can see we have an imbalance beginning to go. And this is where, this is the reason that hormone replacement therapy was introduced. Kind of back in the 60s was when it began to gain popularity. And hormone replacement therapy was a way to help people alleviate some of the unwanted physical changes and unpleasant things that were happening during that time of hormonal imbalance. And also, as estrogen was somewhat dominant in that time, people wanted to change that. People began to understand some of the effects of hormone dominance, and they wanted to offer hormone replacement therapy to do something about that. So, first of all, it's important to understand, you see here at the bottom of this graphic, it says there's a difference in physiological and pharmacological dosage. So if we're talking about estrogen, for example, your body makes estrogen. It makes enough estrogen that it needs to perform the function of estrogen. That would be your physiological dosage of estrogen, the natural amount of estrogen that is needed to complete its purpose, okay? Now, a pharmacological dosage is a very, very high dosage of estrogen, specifically in this situation, that actually tells the body, hey, you got plenty of estrogen, you need to stop making that, and it sort of turns that off. So the theory is that if you introduce a pharmacological dosage of estrogen through hormone replacement therapy. Now, traditional hormone replacement therapy actually has estrogen and progesterone in it. But anyway, if you introduce that pharmacological dosage of estrogen, it essentially kind of tricks the body into lowering the estrogen that it has. Okay, that's the theory. But as hormone replacement therapy has continued to go on, it has become very controversial. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you you should do it or you shouldn't do it. That is a choice for you to make with your health practitioner. But it's important to know some of the facts, and it's important to know some things surrounding it and why it is controversial. And obviously, we all seek to make the best choices that we can for our bodies. And so just, here's some information, and it'll give you some things to think about. So there's a study called the Boston Nurses Questionnaire Study that's a relatively well-known study in the world of hormone replacement therapy, and it was done on 121,700 nurses over the period of 18 months. And 18 years, not 18 months. And you see here in this graph, this first group of people, these nurses were given traditional hormone replacement therapy, the estrogen and the progesterone, for a period of 10 years. And during that time and through the 18 years of the study, 100% of the participants that received that hormone replacement therapy over a period of 10 years, they had 100% risk of breast cancer. That means there was 100% incidence of some form or fashion of breast cancer. And that is really interesting. Okay, then you look at the next group, and this next group was also given hormone replacement therapy over a period of 10 years, but they were only given the estrogen. They were not given the progesterone. And this decreased the risk from 100% of the people to 40%. Then the next group you have there is women that were given the hormone replacement therapy, but they were given it for 5 years as opposed to 10 years. And you can see there again that 40% of those people had the risk as well of breast cancer. So what this study is showing us is that maybe some of the original intended reasons and uses of hormone replacement therapy maybe aren't exactly as they once thought they were. Now, hormone replacement therapy does oftentimes help people with their symptoms, and so that's why it's highly controversial as far as the benefits and the risks and things like that. But it is very possible that there are other, more natural, more safe options that we have to reducing our symptoms of hormone imbalance and actually bringing the body back into balance and reducing the risk of some of these harmful things. So we're going to kind of talk about that. We're going to talk about estrogen dominance and why that is not something that we want to experience and what to do about it. So just keep listening and we'll kind of dissect a couple of these things. And I know this is a lot of information. It's kind of a lot of science that we're going to talk about. So just Get ready. Okay, so there was a quote a couple years ago in the Prevention magazine by Dr. Brett that said one of the biggest reasons women get into trouble with breast cancer is too much estrogen floating around in their bodies. Now, while that is an accurate statement, a lot of people maybe disagree with where he said too much estrogen, because it depends what kind of estrogen and depends on a couple different factors. But basically, estrogen dominance is a great contributing factor of breast cancer. So obviously that is something that we want to get under control. So let's talk about the different types of estrogen that you're exposed to. So the first thing we have is natural estrogen. This is estrogen that is produced by the body. It's either produced in the ovaries, the adrenals, or the fat tissues. Those are the only places where estrogen can be produced. This estrogen is, it's just normal. It is not highly aggressive. It is not overactive. It is actually calm, and ironically, your body doesn't actually even produce a super significant amount of estrogen, okay? The next category of estrogen that we have is called xenoestrogen. Now, this is the bad estrogen. This is the estrogen that we do not want. It comes from man-made chemicals, which actually mimic natural estrogen in the body, although the effects that it creates are greatly different than natural estrogen. It's much more dominant than natural estrogen. It is much more powerful, so to speak, and it really wreaks havoc on the body. This is a synthetic estrogen that is all over the place. We'll talk more about in a minute about where you find these xenoestrogens, but you might think to yourself, oh, well, I'm not having hormone replacement therapy, so I'm not exposed to synthetic estrogen. Well, sadly you are, and we'll dissect that in a minute. And then the third kind of estrogen that you have is phytoestrogen. This is a much weaker, much less dominant plant estrogen that is supportive of normal hormone function. So it's approximately 1,000 times weaker than natural estrogen. So it is very weak, but it kind of has a superpower. So if you're thinking of these estrogens, if you're trying to understand these in terms of their function and how they affect your body, I want you to think about a playground, for example. If you're on a playground and think of the natural estrogen is sort of the shy kid on the playground. It's kind of going around, doing its business, and it's just kind of shy, right? And its ultimate goal is this child wants to, say, attach itself to the slide, okay? We're going to pretend that is the hormone, that is the receptor to which the estrogen binds and thus transmit its chemical messages to the nucleus of the cell. We'll talk about that in a minute, but just know the natural estrogen is shy, the shy kid on the playground. So then you have the xenoestrogen. The xenoestrogen is the bully on the playground. The xenoestrogen actually gets in the way of that natural estrogen binding. It blocks the receptor site so that the natural estrogen cannot come in, and it takes over in dominance. Then you have the phytoestrogen, and the phytoestrogen is kind of small, it's kind of chill, it's weak, but it has the great ability to actually push out the xenoestrogen and bind itself to the receptors and function much like the natural estrogen and create positive things going on in the body. So what are xenoestrogens? Xenoestrogens are synthetic estrogens, and you are going to find them everywhere. You're going to find them in plastic. You're going to find them in just about every meat or dairy product that comes from a commercial farm. Most animals are hormonally enhanced. and are going to have those xenoestrogens in them when you consume them. You're going to find xenoestrogens in your personal care products, most likely, unless you're specifically choosing products that do not have these hormonal pollutants and disruptors in them. You're going to find them in pesticides. You're going to find them in synthetic fragrances. Xenoestrogens are all over the place. We cannot avoid them all. We can make some very, very intentional and specific lifestyle choices to reduce them, which is really, really important. And you'll see the dangers of estrogen dominance in a minute, and you're going to want to do everything you can to reduce your exposure to the xenoestrogens, but you're still going to encounter some. You cannot get away from all of them if you live and you make your life in normal society. So first of all, let's talk a little bit of science here. So you see here's a cell, and we've got the cell nucleus in the middle, and then you see this blue kind of tube looking thing there, and that is the receptor site, okay? And then you have the circle, that blue circle on the end, and that is the natural estrogen. So this says hormones are chemical messengers and only work in the nucleus of the cell, okay? So estrogen has a job to do, and it has to transmit messages to that nucleus of the cell, right? So this is great. That's how it works. That's a good picture, okay? Well, xenoestrogens, right? That's the bad guy we just talked about. They actually block the receptor sites. Now, they bind to those receptor sites just like every other estrogens. Estrogens function, all estrogens, whether it's natural estrogen, xenoestrogen, or phytoestrogen, they all function the same way, but have very, very different effects. So the xenoestrogen, and you'll get to see in a minute a slide showing this, but the xenoestrogen actually blocks the receptor sites for the natural estrogen and prevents that normal activity from happening, and thus creates an estrogen dominant situation. Now, as you're thinking about this and you're thinking to yourself, hey, I wonder what my hormone levels are. I wonder if I have an overexposure, overproduction of estrogen, and you want to get that checked. Many of you might be tempted to go get a blood test. You've heard you can do your hormone testing through a blood test, but blood serum tests for hormones are actually largely inaccurate. And that is because, first of all, the serum is kind of the watery liquid that doesn't have the red blood cells in it. And when your hormones are being transported throughout the body, they actually are transported by proteins, and they bind to these proteins, and they are not biologically active. They're virtually undetectable in blood. And also hormones are constantly changing by hour within your body. But you cannot detect up to 90% of hormonal activity in your blood, because that is the way they're transported, and during transport, they are not biologically active. So a much better option, a much cheaper option actually would be to have a saliva test. You do need to go to somebody who knows what they're doing, because results for that can be inaccurate as well, but they are much more accurate than a blood serum test. So what is even another great option is to understand the symptoms that are associated with hormonal imbalance, with estrogenic dominance. So here are some very, very common symptoms associated with this: decreased sex drive, irregular or abnormal periods, bloating and water retention, breast swelling and tenderness, mood swings, depression, weight gain, cold hands and feet, headaches, and osteoporosis. Now, estrogenic dominance might not be the only thing that can cause these issues, but these issues all have that in common. And you may be looking at these things saying, oh, I thought those were just normal, symptoms of PMS. Well, severe PMS is actually not normal. Yes, are you going to have some regular changes in your body as your hormones are changing? Yes, but experiencing these things on a regular basis is a very, very good sign that there is something in your body going on, and your body is telling you, we need some balance here. This is not right. I don't feel well. Something is going on. So make sure you understand what these symptoms are so that you can recognize them if they come up in your life or a life of maybe somebody that you care about. So what are phytoestrogens? This is an example of one, fermented soy. Fermented soy is actually very healthy for you. And it is an example of a phytoestrogen. It has a high phytoestrogen content. Phytoestrogens are natural plant estrogens. You can find them in all sorts of fruits and vegetables, in nuts and seeds, and all kinds of stuff. But they help to protect the tissue from the effects of the xenoestrogens and the other hormonal pollutants. So they're the hero again on the playground. So here's another picture of this cell, and you see you've got all those blue cylinders there that are the receptor sites. That little blue circle in the middle, and it's got the arrow pointing to it, that's your natural estrogen that your body has created, okay? It's there, it's binding to the receptor site. Well, then you see these xenoestrogens trying to come in and overtake everything, right? You see the red comparative to the blue. There are so many more, okay? So what they really want to do is come in and push those natural estrogens out of the way. They want to bind to the receptor sites and create that dominant negative estrogenic situation. Well, then you have the phytoestrogens, where are the green guys, and they are coming in through hopefully a very healthy diet. They're found in a lot of food. They're hopefully coming in through other ways. We'll talk about that in a minute. And they are actually going to not allow those xenoestrogens to come in and attach to those receptor sites. They're going to attach to them themselves, creating a positive environment. You want them to bind to the receptor sites just as you do with the natural estrogen, and they help protect the body and create the effects and do the messaging that the estrogen is meant to do. So phytoestrogens are found in many foods: whole grains, beans, seeds, nuts, various fruits and vegetables, and seed oils. So hopefully if you are eating a good, balanced, clean diet, you are going to be getting some of this phytoestrogen content through that. But I want to introduce to you a couple other ways to help work on balancing your hormones and reducing or eliminating an estrogenic dominance situation, because we do not want that. So let's talk about a couple of things. So first of all, it's important to note that phytoestrogens are what we call adaptogenic. That means that they will adapt to the condition in your body. If you are in a state of estrogen dominance, phytoestrogens are not going to increase that. Phytoestrogens are not going to put you into a situation of estrogen dominance. Remember, they are 1,000 times weaker than the natural estrogen that is in your body. They will not put you into a bad situation of being estrogen dominant. They will adapt. If your estrogen is too high, they will work to balance it lower. If your estrogen is too low, they will work to balance it higher. So that's an adaptogenic compound. Now, one thing to consider taking is this phytoestrogen lifetime complex. Now, there are two kinds of phytoestrogens: isoflavones and isoflavones, I think is actually how you say it, and ligand. So you see in this first part, this is showing you what's in this phytoestrogen complex. You have the phytoestrogen isoflavone standardized to genistein. And I know you're going like, whoa, what the heck? That was a lot of big words kind of in the middle of that. But genistein is the most common and widely studied isoflavone that there is out there. And it has a very, very specific job in the studies that have been done on it. It's also been shown to be one of the most beneficial phytoestrogen compounds that there are. So it binds with the estrogen receptors, blocking out the xenoestrogens. We've talked about that. It has mild estrogenic activity. And a really cool thing about genistein and phytoestrogens in general is they produce no harmful metabolites. Metabolites are the byproduct that is created in estrogen metabolism. In normal cellular function, when the estrogen is doing its job, metabolites, that's the byproduct, is going to be created. Some of those metabolites can be very dangerous. Even in normal, natural estrogenic activity, your body's still going to create metabolites. And in a perfect world, your body knows how to get rid of that and everything is fine, right? But in a state of imbalance and maybe poor lifestyle choices, maybe exposure to things, maybe foods, a whole host of different things, your body is not able to rid itself of those harmful metabolites, and we have an issue. So phytoestrogen, thankfully, doesn't even create the harmful metabolites. When it is metabolized, no metabolites come. You also have the pomegranate extract, which is standardized to ellagic acid, which is helpful for a host of things with hormonal balance as well as symptom management. Then you have the ligand content we talked about, which is the other kind of phytoestrogen that comes specifically from flaxseed extract. And ligand has a very, very specific job. It helps manage the byproduct. It helps manage those metabolites. It is also complementary to hormone replacement therapy. So if by chance you're doing hormone replacement therapy and you are just continuing with that, you can actually take phytoestrogens to help complement that and help hopefully remove some of the byproducts that are associated with that. So the isoflavone blocks the receptor sites and doesn't create any metabolites. The ligand helps get rid of the metabolites that are created by the xenoestrogens and by the natural estrogen as well. So that phytoestrogen, again, that's the hero on the playground. So estrogen metabolites equal an increased cancer risk. If you have these metabolites happening, your body is not able to rid itself of them, then you are greatly increasing your cancer risk. It's also important, excuse me, that you have really, really proper nutrition and a way to cleanse your body of these metabolites and the xenoestrogens, because when those xenoestrogens get blocked, they're not getting metabolized, or maybe they even are, or whatever. You've got to have a way to cleanse those out of your body. And one of the best things that you can be doing for that is taking the Lifelong Vitality Pack. There are some great components in that which really facilitate the cleansing of those metabolites, the removal of the metabolites and the removal of the xenoestrogens in your body, because we want to get those out of there. Another thing that I'm going to recommend to you is Clary Calm. Clary Calm is the monthly blend for women. Sorry, that LY is left off there. Lovely typo. Now, Clary Calm is unique because you see all the list of ingredients that are a part of this blend. And first of all of these oils are phytoestrogens. So you're getting some phytoestrogen compounds when you're using this blend. Here's another thing, though, that you'll notice. When you are under a lot of stress, and I won't go into the whole scientific explanation of this, but when you are under a lot of stress, then that increases your estrogen. There's several things that have to happen for that to happen. It has to have some hormones turning into different things and yada, yada, yada. But ultimately, if you are under a lot of stress, you are increasing your risk of estrogen dominance. So what do you see here in this blend? You see clary sage, lavender, bergamot, Roman chamomile, cedarwood, ylang ylang, all oils that help facilitate calming, that help facilitate reducing stress, that help facilitate relaxation. Also, you see some great oils in here that are helpful for calming the muscular system, for reducing tension, okay? And those are all symptoms that can come along with your monthly cycle. So you're getting some phytoestrogens to help balance things out, and you're also getting some great symptom management in there as well. Now, if you look at the last three ingredients on here, the palmarosa, the carrot seed, and the vitex, these are a great support to the endocrine system. So that's like an extra little punch packed in there, right? We know the endocrine system is very important in regards to our hormones. So those 3 oils specifically are a great support to the endocrine system. So Clary Calm really is supportive to the body on many, many levels. You would apply this to your abdomen. Many people will begin applying it at different times. Some people choose to apply it right before they're going to start their period. Other people choose to apply it before they are ovulating. I would say listen to your body and apply it as needed. Other people choose to use it every day. So specifically, if you are entering into menopause and you're needing that daily support that's going along with that, it's going to be a great thing for you to use. So another thing we need to talk about that goes hand in hand with your hormones is your bone health. And a lot of people think, oh, I don't need to worry about my bone health until I am much older. But you can actually see here on this graph, before you are 30, your bone density starts to decrease. And if you are in an estrogenic if you're estrogen dominant, your bone density is going to decrease much more rapidly. And that's why we see osteoporosis rates just really, really rise, because especially as women begin to go through menopause, their bone health can be affected. And so you want to take care of that. Yes, we want to work on balancing our hormones. We've talked about the phytoestrogen. We've talked about Clary Calm, but we have to address our bone health from a nutritional standpoint as well. And that is where the Bone Nutrient Lifetime Complex comes into play. It provides optimal levels of bioavailable minerals and vitamins for bone health. You can see the amounts there, but it is really, really important to support your bones. More women will actually die this year from complication of hip fractures than breast cancer. And so we can't take this for granted. Also, if there happen to be any men listening or any women who have any men in their life, men are not excluded from osteoporosis. And sadly, more and more men are not excluded from breast cancer. And when you understand how we become estrogen dominant most of the time, now this is not 100% of the time, but when you understand how seriously xenoestrogens contribute to estrogen dominance and how men are exposed to xenoestrogens just as women are, you can see how men are beginning to be affected by some of these things that didn't necessarily affect them in times before, when we didn't have such a prevalence of xenoestrogens in our society. There's a couple other things that you need to think about just in managing your life changes. So we talked about how stress actually contributes to a negative estrogen dominant situation. So you want to do your best to reduce your stress. I've put on here some oils that are really helpful for that. Balance, Serenity, Peace, Console, Wild Orange. Those are just a few of my personal favorites to reduce stress. There are many, many more. It's important that you control your toxicity. Now, sometimes when we start talking about toxicity, we start talking about our exposure, we start talking about health and eating, people have a tendency to want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because they say, you know what, there's xenoestrogens everywhere, everything's trying to kill me all the time, so I'm just not going to worry about it. Well, I would encourage you guys to do your best in what you can control. You cannot control what you are necessarily exposed to as you walk around and you lead your life. But in your home, you can make a few very, very simple changes to greatly reduce your exposure to xenoestrogens. For example, in controlling toxicity, the On Guard products are great. You're not going to get your xenoestrogens and the ingredients in that. You can use those for cleaning, for your laundry, for your hand wash, all that kind of stuff. You want to be using clean personal care products. You want to make sure that your products do not have endocrine and hormonal disruptors in them. If you use a lot of plastic in your life, I encourage you to switch to glass as much as you can. All of those things help with your toxicity. Let me see. I think somebody put a comment in this chat box, but I can't get, oh, there we go. Hang on. Just see if this is something. In terms of birth control pills, or option, does this add to estrogen dominance? It can. Again, that's one of those things that is highly controversial. And you can see some somewhat controversial research that is being done on there. But yes, when you are taking birth control pills, you are using a synthetic hormone in the midst of that. And so that is going to affect your hormonal situation. And what birth control you're on, some of that is going to affect that, because there's different things and different ones. And so that's kind of like a big topic. But a very, very simplistic answer is yes, it can. You want to add in your whole food nutrition. Your Lifelong Vitality Pack is so, so important to your overall health and to your hormonal health. Do not skimp on that. And you need to be choosing, as best you can, real food that is not made without hormonal enhancement. Pesticides often have xenoestrogens in them. So do your best to suggest to purchase organic products if possible. If you cannot afford all organic products, and many, many people cannot, I encourage you to do some research on what are the products that are the most highly sprayed or highly covered in pesticides. You can find what's called the Dirty Dozen list. And if you only have a handful of items that you can get organic, then choose the ones that are on that Dirty Dozen list. Improve your lifestyle habits, sleep, rest, exercise, right? All of that, it affects your entire being, and your entire being all works together. And then it's okay to treat your symptoms, right? Some hormonal changes are normal. You've got a fluctuation of your hormones in your monthly cycle. Menopause is a normal change of life, right? Your hormones are changing based on what's going on in your body. So it's okay to treat some of those unpleasant things, but when they become kind of those things in that list that we listed for your estrogen dominance, that's when you're getting into some more serious kind of issues. But we do want to balance our hormones as best as we can, and phytoestrogen and things like that, reducing our exposure to xenoestrogens. Those are proving to be some very, very effective ways that we can do that. So that is really the end of our presentation. I'm going to go back over here and turn my camera back on. So I don't know if any of you guys have any questions at all. But if you do, you can type them in the chat box. I hope that was helpful to you guys. I know it was just sort of like just a little bit of information, but also can be kind of confusing. But I just wanted you guys to understand on a base level, what is the relationship with estrogen and progesterone in our body? Why does it matter if we're estrogen dominant? How does that happen? And what can we do about it? Because it really is becoming a concern in today's world. And most people, without doing something to control it, can end up in an estrogen dominant situation very, very quickly. So if you have any questions, type them in, or if you want to ask a question, feel free to turn your camera on, whatever. I'll just hang tight just for a second, and then if nobody has any questions, then we'll just hop off. Or any comments or anything? This is all super interesting to me as I was researching about it and educating myself and, talking to people that work in this field. And I didn't realize how prevalent it was and exactly what the xenoestrogens did. I knew they were bad, but I didn't know how they really affected our body and blocked the harmful things.
I had a question.
Yeah. Who's this, Courtney?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and my kids were throwing a fit in the middle of some of this, so I may have missed it. You may have gone over it.
No worries.
How are we getting the outside estrogen from pesticides and stuff like that? The bad estrogen?
Yeah, you're getting, they're called xenoestrogens, and xenoestrogens are present. Basically, xenoestrogens are synthetic estrogen, and they're present in all kinds of different things. Plastics, commercial meats and dairy, because those things have been hormonally enhanced. pesticides, all these synthetic chemicals. Basically, xenoestrogens are man-made chemicals that function as estrogens. Very, very strong, dominant, overpowering estrogen in your body.
Okay, so that's why you were suggesting the glass and the organic stuff.
Yes, because the xenoestrogens block your body from completing the normal estrogen function.
Right.
They create really harmful effects because of that.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, Tiffany, you said for people who may be going through fertility treatments, what are the main concerns we should be aware of? Honestly, I do not know. I do not know about fertility treatment, so I do not want to pretend to know. So I'm sorry. I don't have a better option or better answer for you. I wish I knew the answer, but I just don't. But I bet we could dive into it at some point and try to do some research and talk to some people and figure it out. Amika, did you have a question?
Yes, Mindy, I just had a comment. I just want to say thank you. Very informational. I know I had a question about something to recommend for my mother, who is about 63 years old. So, and then I remember you posted those 2 supplements in there, and then being able to talk about it, link it to estrogen and all that, it certainly helps me out.
Oh,
and
good.
Also, it's good because we can also incorporate this in our classes or one-on-ones if we're talking to people, because it all ties in, especially that last slide that kind of goes step by step on things that we can do to kind of better ourselves. So thank you. Very informational.
You're so welcome. Thank you for joining in.
You're welcome.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I will probably post this recording. So if you know that there's people who'd like to watch it, but they couldn't hop on live, no problem. So we'll post it up. And I hope everybody has a great night. And I will chat with you guys later. Bye.